I've read all these books about productivity, but there's one huge problem. And the book by Oliver Burkman gives the solution. Let me tell you about it. Hey, my name is Michael Thompson. On this channel, we discuss personal and professional development from a Christian perspective. And this book by Oliver Burkman, it's called 4,000 Weeks, and it describes this huge problem with the productivity culture. Oliver Burkman, he's a journalist who writes about the latest and greatest on time management. And he says that the problem with productivity is that every time that we get more free time, there's an infinite amount of tasks that we have to do, and we just stuff our time. And instead of having a more meaningful life, our life is just very full. In this book, 4,000 Weeks, he describes how we can have a meaningful life instead of just one that's really busy. So the average human lifespan is approximately 4,000 weeks. And this means that we have a limited amount of time. He actually talks in the book about how he asked several different people how long or how many weeks they thought we'd be alive. And somebody even said like 500,000. And then he made some kind of a joke about, well, the Earth hasn't even been around for necessarily as many weeks as what some people said. But this book focuses on three main principles. And this is how you can live a meaningful life. The first principle is that we should understand our time. And to understand our time, we have to embrace limits. A lot of times whenever you look at your time, you try to fit, as I said earlier, as many tasks into, say, a day or a week as you possibly can. And that just makes for someone who has a super busy schedule. And one of the other factors that makes a big difference is the modern invention of the clock. Because before the clock, and obviously a clock is necessary because we have to show up and all be focused on the right things at the right time. Say in a corporate setting or even in a factory, they made clocks so that you could, instead of just having sunrise and noon, it'd be a little easier to identify the time. But the downside of the clock is that at all times we know what time it is, and then we also know what time something else starts and something else finishes. And before the clock, we just worked. When the sun came up, you worked. And whenever the sun went down, you went to sleep. And this was a much simpler way to live life. And there's a benefit to having a clock. A clock can definitely keep us on track, but it's important to know that our modern concept, heavily influenced by the clock, can make us constantly stressing and worrying about things. And back in the day, if they didn't get something done that day, they just did it the next day, whatever. And today, we tend to fit too many things into the amount of time that we have. Oliver Burkman also says that we need to prioritize meaningful pursuits. And he talks about how the idea of FOMO is really, it's contradictory because FOMO is the fear of missing out. And a lot of times people think that, if they don't want to miss out on certain life decisions. And so they'll really, really, really prioritize enjoying something in a day, or they'll prioritize whatever it is. But in truth, missing out is actually what makes you really, really effective at most things in life. When you look at a doctor or a lawyer or somebody who is very accomplished in their job, they went through FOMO, and that's why society respects them, because they went through certain difficult things and they gave up certain pleasures for a certain season to get training, whatever it is. And FOMO is the fact that they missed out is the actual reason that society respects them. So we all should understand, at the end of the day, you're gonna miss out on something. And even with technology, we all tend to be on Facebook and Twitter and all these different things, and we tend to focus on what other people are doing. And now with technology, we are so much more aware of what we're missing out on. When back in the day, they didn't have technology, and if you weren't doing something, then you didn't know you were missing out. You may have heard other people were having a party or whatever, but at the end of the day, you weren't able to just go on Facebook and see what everybody else is doing. And it's important for us to understand, and this has really helped me a lot, is that if I'm gonna understand time well, then FOMO, if I wanna be good at something, FOMO is part of it. And in reality, every choice you make excludes countless other possibilities. And with technology now, as I mentioned earlier, we at all times know what everybody else is doing. And so this can make life a little bit more difficult, or can make making the right decision a little bit more difficult. But at the end of the day, you respect the doctor and the lawyer and the successful person literally because they chose to miss out on certain things for a season. And that's one of the huge factors of being productive. And so when we're talking about embracing life limits, understand you will miss out on things, but that's okay, because especially before technology, to choose to do one thing is to choose to miss out on everything else. And so that's not a bad thing. Embrace FOMO, because that's part of being an effective person and understanding the way that time should be viewed. One of the other problems with understanding time is the efficiency trap. Now, if you fall into this trap, you, like me, tend to put as many tasks into a day as you possibly can. And then if you get something done quicker than you planned, you tend to put more things into the end of the day. And if something takes longer, you still try to execute all the things you had planned in the first place. And this efficiency trap basically says that we tend to just fill our days to the maximum capacity. And when we do that, we tend to be stressed out. We tend to feel like there's always too much to do. And it's really important for us to understand that there's no reason we should ever think we can get everything done. And our tendency as humans is to squeeze every last minute out of our day. And even if you could get everything done you had planned for a day, like you may have done this before, you just try to get something else done for tomorrow. And there's a book that actually talks about how technology and cleaning houses, a lot of women thought that they would have more time whenever the washing machine came out or whenever the dishwasher came out, when in reality, the standard of cleanliness just went through the roof. Now to have a clean house, it would have to be this much more cleaner than what the standard was back in the day. They had all this time that was given back to them because they had technology, but the result was they just relatively changed their expectations. And we tend to do that a lot of time with the way that we view our time as well. Here's the big picture. If you have to understand that you're a finite person, you only have 4,000 weeks. Focus on the things that are most important to you and understand you're not going to get everything done, and that's okay. Move on. Don't try to burn the midnight oil every single night of the week. Don't try to fit all these extra things into your week. Be thankful for the time you have. Execute the most important things to the best of your ability, and after that, move on. The first way that you and I can live more creatively is to understand time. And then the second way is by embracing the present. And Oliver Burkman gives us 6 different tips that we can use to embrace the present. The first one is that we need to know that our limitations can lead to greater productivity and they can lead to greater creativity. There was a couple of times when I was in my bachelor's degree where I had a really limited amount of time for studying. And instead of saying, I can't get it all done, it forced me to become more creative. I even know that there was a church that they had like a Wi-Fi issue and that caused them to basically expand into different locations. And that constraint, that limitation, caused them to be much more creative, and they were able to plant more churches because of that one problem. And you and I need to really remember that whenever we are really stressed or really focused on one problem, remember that this could lead you to be more creative. I've also seen this with my workouts. If I'm limited on my equipment, I've actually done new workouts that got me more sore and really mixed things up because I was limited. So remember that limitations, they can lead to greater productivity and creativity. And then the second way that we can embrace the present is to prioritize what's important. Stephen Covey uses an illustration about time, and it's a jar with rocks and sand. You may have seen this before, but if you try to put all the big rocks in first, and then you put the little rocks in and then the sand, it all fits. And that's the way that we should view our commitments. Put the most important things in your schedule, put those in first in the day. This is something I constantly struggle with. Today I did well with doing my most important things first in the day, but I always want to check my email and do my meaningless tasks first. But that's the opposite of what I need to be doing, because I need to be focusing on the most important things, the things that may take the most time. And whenever I do those first, all the tasks tend to fit in the day. That could be something that you want to work on to improve the way that you embrace the present. The third way that you can embrace the present is to engage deeply with a few meaningful activities instead of skimming a bunch of shallow ones. And I've seen this with research. I'm currently working on my dissertation topic, and instead of just writing on the New Testament, I'm going to pick a topic within the New Testament. And then I'm going to narrow that even further to the letters that Paul wrote. And then recently my teacher reminded me that it needs to get more narrow. And it's the same way if you want to be somebody who stewards your time really well. If you want to embrace the present, you need to make sure that you focus on the things that are most important. If your job and your family is the most important, focus your main chunks of time on those things. And especially with family, if you're not careful, you can not really do this on purpose, but hobbies can come before family because you're not engaging in the more meaningful activities first. You're doing the hobbies. It might be the thing you want to do, but if you zoom out on your life, the best way that you can spend your time is to do the meaningful activities first. The fourth way to embrace the present is to nurture relationships and invest time in them. Like I said, it's important to me to be somebody who's involved with family. And one of the things in society that has really changed this was the invention of the billable hour. And Oliver Burkman talks about how lawyers, they looked at all their time as valuable based on if they could bill for it. Basically, that is a way that they measured work. And if you're not careful, he said that there was a study that showed that lawyers, a lot of times they would value their time based on if they made money. But here's the problem. Not everything makes money. And so they naturally valued less their family time because it didn't necessarily pay them. Well, we all know family time is more important, but that invention of the billable hour really threw a wrench in the way that some people thought about things. So nurture relationships. Always focus on relationships above everything else. And then I personally think work needs to come second. But again, work does not come before family, and that's really important. To embrace the present, you also need to remove the when I finally mentality, because some people view time as only something that is to be used and not something that's to be enjoyed. Because it's really easy to, in the society that we live in, it's really easy for us to focus on some future thing that we're gonna do in life, and then the time that we spend now is only valuable if it moves us forward. Well, if you're not careful, you're gonna spend your whole entire life just focusing on the next thing, just focusing on the next step. I have friends that are just always waiting until they get married, and it's almost like life doesn't really have meaning until they get married. But here's the thing. You can do that all throughout life, because then you might get married, but then it's like, okay, once I get that job, and then once I have kids, and if you're not careful, you can walk through your whole life just waiting for the next thing. And we kind of naturally, if we see somebody who's like working a certain kind of a job that isn't super impressive, we may say, okay, they're working on that just to get to the next thing. But no matter who you are, it is important to embrace the season that you're in. And if you're always focused on the next thing, that doesn't really go away whenever you get the next thing. And you can live a life that's always scrunched on the time. You're always trying to just use time rather than just enjoy where you're at. And I'll be the first to argue that you need to be productive and move forward, but with the understanding that you're gonna enjoy your current season. And there's a lot to be said about that. In Scripture, the Bible constantly brings up how important it is for us to be thankful and for us to be content. And that has worked for thousands of years, and God created this world a specific way, and He knows man, and He instructed us to be content. So be content. Don't be somebody who's always trying to get to the next phase. The last way that we can embrace the present is to avoid the extreme view of time as a currency. And as I mentioned earlier, the billable hour really made a difference in the way that people thought about time. And Oliver Burkman points out that instead of focusing on only spending our time in a way that makes money, that if we do that, it's gonna cause anxiety. And then he says that even leisure feels like it has to be justified. And you'll see that. They'll instead of resting like we're supposed to, and when I say we're supposed to, I believe, God created this earth that on the seventh day, He rested. He modeled that for us. And if we don't rest, then we're not gonna be able to be the people that God has called us to be. And even if you're not a Christian though, if you don't rest, or you view leisure as a time that needs to be productive, that leads to a lot of anxiety. And who wants to live their life being anxious the entire time? So don't view all the different hours that you have in the day as having to be productive. Rest well. Be somebody who prioritizes rest. Now, you don't need to go to the extreme, because then that leads into laziness, but don't view time as just from this extreme perspective of it has to be a currency. View time as, hey, I'm gonna work when I'm supposed to work, I'm gonna rest when I'm supposed to rest, and that's gonna help me embrace the present and the way that I view my life. The way that we can live meaningfully is to first understand our time, to embrace the present, and finally, you need to consider what kind of legacy do you wanna leave behind. I need to do the same. Are my daily actions, are they gonna align with my long-term goals? Like if I wanna be a great dad, and I wanna be somebody who's biblically driven, I wanna be someone who manages my time well, do my daily actions line up with that? Or am I somebody who's, my daily actions say that I'm a workaholic, or my daily actions say that I'm lazy? That's something that we as people, we tend to take the route of least resistance and do the bare minimum, and then we tend to be over and extreme in the things that we enjoy. So if you're someone who enjoys to work, that's great, but you have to keep that in balance. And one of the ways that you can do that is to incorporate leisure, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, into your schedule. When are you gonna rest? Is that on your calendar? Is that important? And again, it's not to be at the extreme where you're always resting, because that can be lazy, but you need to prioritize that. And sometimes that means saying no, and that can be uncomfortable at times, but at the end of the day, Do you want to leave the legacy that you're a workaholic? Or do you want to leave the legacy that you managed your time, but you valued your family far above the things that you did for work? So 4,000 weeks, what should we do about what we see in 4,000 weeks? Well, the solution to viewing our time wrong is to stop believing that you're going to somehow have enough time to do everything, and instead prioritize what truly matters. And if we take that thought and apply it to all the things that we do, we're not going to try to do too much, but we're also not going to be ineffective with our time. So reflect on your own time management. The way that you use your time, say in my life, maybe it means you get a journal out and you say, what are the things that I spend my time doing, and what kind of legacy is that going to leave at the end of the day? So reflect on your time management, journal some things, make some adjustments, and we'll see you guys in the next video.